Alright guys, let's talk about inventory turnover. And why is inventory turnover so important to us? You'll see that page 338, the little paragraph under computing inventory turnover. Standard turnover rates for corporate businesses are published. Some standard rates are 3.5 for hardware stores. Listen to this, 12.7 for grocery stores, 3.3 for nurseries, almost 40% for gas stations and mini-marts. So a gas station turns their inventory about once a month, and a gas station or mini-mart turns it, one every, almost 3 times a month. Not 3 times, maybe 2 times a month. So it's very important to measure inventory turnover. You'll also notice that the higher the turnover, the higher the inventory turnover, the products are usually have a lower profit margin per item. For example, a grocery store lives off a very small profit margin per item. They count on volume. But your antique stores, your jewelry stores, have a very high markup, which means they have a very high profit margin per item. But yet their inventory is turned so seldom they have to have that high turnover. So that's just something to keep in mind. What we want to look at here, and you've got to catch this or it'll come back to bite you. Average inventory. Inventory is taken annually. You'll have 2 entries. Even though you take 1 inventory, you're going to have 2 entries. You're going to have a beginning inventory. Beginning inventory is BI. And you'll have an ending inventory. Ending inventory is EI. Which means you add your beginning inventory plus your ending inventory and divide by 2. And it will give you an average inventory. Let's look at if you do an inventory twice a year. You do one in June, you do one in December. You do your beginning inventory plus your end of 6 months, in my case it would be June, plus your ending inventory. Divide that by 3. So even though you inventory twice a year, you're going to have 3 data entries. Look at quarterly. I'm going to do one every 3 months. That's a lot of inventories, but some places do that. You'll have your beginning inventories, you'll have your 3 quarterly inventories, and you'll have your ending inventory. And you'll divide that by 5 because now you've got 5 entries, even though you're only doing it quarterly. Why is that? Because you're going to have that beginning inventory. You'll have your 3 quarterlies. Your ending inventory will just be your 4th quarter inventory. But you'll divide by 5 because you'll have 5 entries. The beginning inventory is actually, if you remember, is your ending inventory from the previous month or the previous inventory cycle. If you do one every month, that's a lot of inventories. You'll do your beginning inventory plus your 11 monthly. Your ending inventory will just be your 12th monthly inventory. And again, you'll divide that by 13. You've got to remember to increase this by 1 because you're having your beginning inventory will be one of your data entries. Important you realize that. Alright. So having said that, looking at page 338 and 339, you've got some steps boxes. There's 2 ways to compute inventory turnover. Inventory by sales and inventory by cost. You'll notice at the bottom of 338, the book calls it to compute inventory turnover at retail. I just call it sales. The one on page 339, to compute inventory turnover at cost. Now there's a difference between these 2 steps boxes, so you've got to determine this. Step 1 for retail, determine net sales. Look at page 339. Step 1 for computing inventory at cost is completely different. Step 1 for computing by cost is beginning inventory plus purchases minus ending inventory equals cost of goods sold. Two very distinct steps boxes. The key here is to make sure you know if you're doing inventory turnover by sales or retail or cost. You've got to determine that. So let's do one. Let's look at the steps boxes before I move on, just to make sure you understand. You've got to make sure you understand this. Inventory by retail, determine net sales. Sometimes net sales are going to be given to you. So step one, you don't even have to do anything. Step one is just given to you. Compute average inventory using retail price. We just looked at that. If we do it semi-annually, you add your beginning inventory, your middle inventory, your ending inventory, and divide by 3. That's how I'd find my average inventory. And then I have compute turnover, net sales divided by average inventory. And then turnover at cost, you have your beginning inventory formula. Again, step 2 is the same for both. Compute the average inventory, and then you have another formula, cost of goods sold divided by average inventory. Make sure you understand this. Inventory turnover is unbelievably important. All right, let's look at example H. Assume that inventories for the year based on selling price are as follows. It gives you 90,000 was your beginning inventory, end of 3 months was 80,000, month 6 was 100,000, month 9 was 70,000, and at the 12th month, the ending inventory, remember month 12 would be your ending inventory of 60,000. Net sales for the year were 520,000. It gives you nice sales right off the bat. Compute the inventory turnover at retail, or I could say sales. So, looking back at the steps box on page 338, to compute inventory turnover at retail, do I have to do anything to find net sales? Net sales are given to me. Net sales is 520. So there's step 1 right there. Step 2, compute average inventory using retail price. Do I have that? I have my, let's see, they're doing inventories, 1, 2, they did quarterly inventories, right? So I have my beginning inventory, I have my first inventory, my second inventory, my third inventory, my fourth inventory, which is also my end of year, which is also my ending inventory. I add all that together, divide by 5, comes out to 400,000 divided by 5. My average inventory was $80,000. So now, do I have both components I need to do step 3? Sure I do. Step 3, remember, compute average inventory turnover at retail, net sales divided by average inventory. Net sales of $520 divided by my average inventory, which was right in step 2. I turn my inventory 6.5 times a year. So once every 2 months I'm turning my inventory each. The 0.5 will throw you out a little bit, but once every 2 months I'm pretty much turning my inventory. If I'm a grocery store, is that acceptable? Of course not. Grocery stores live off a very low profit margin. If I'm a jeweler, would I love to see 6.5 turnover in my jewelry store? You bet I would. The key to all this is, of course, knowing the steps boxes and reading the question based on selling price. This particular example is based on selling price. Let's look at one dealing with cost. This is example I, down at the bottom of page 339. Assume the beginning inventory cost of $60,000, purchases cost was $300,000, and ending inventory cost was $80,000. Compute the inventory turnover at cost. Read the question. You've got to know whether it's by sales or retail or by cost. This particular one's by cost. So, going to my steps box just above there, it says compute the cost of goods sold using the formula. Beginning inventory. Go ahead, beginning inventory. Beginning inventory was 60,000. Purchases during the year. Purchases during the year was 300,000. Minus end of year. Well, see, I got that total. Goods available for sale is 360 minus the 80,000 of your final inventory because you haven't sold your ending inventory. Your ending inventory is still in your building. You haven't sold it, so it's not cost of goods. So you got to subtract your ending inventory. Cost of goods sold, for this example, comes out to $280,000. So that's step one. I found my cost of goods sold. Step two, compute the average. Beginning inventory, ending inventory. They only did 2 inventories, right? They had a beginning inventory, January 1st, and they had an ending inventory of 80,000. So they did 1 inventory a year. But yet we're going to divide by 2 because we have 2 entries. So you add the 2 inventories together, divide by 2, you get 70,000. Now, step 3, according to page 339, compute inventory turnover at cost, which is cost of goods sold, which is step 1, divided by average inventory, which is step 2. And you come up with, they turn their inventory according to this 4 times a year. So once every 3 months, they turn their inventory, which is pretty good depending on the product. The key is to read the question, are we looking for it by sales or are we looking for it by cost? If you'll look, you'll see on page 339 at the very bottom, step 1 is there. Step 2 and 3 is on the very next page. And that's inventory turnover. Inventory turnover is very important. A lot of your investors will look at inventory turnover. Your managers should be looking at inventory turnover. What if you sell perishable items? What if you sell refrigerated items? What if you sell dated items? You've got to turn those things quickly or you're going to suffer loss. Inventory turnover will help you with that. It will help you know where you stand. Now, why don't we do a couple of these things? We'll see who's watching the videos and who's not watching the videos. Let me grab my notes. Why don't we jump over to page 346. And look at number 346, number 3. Let me turn the projector back on. This will help you a little bit, maybe. Maybe I'll turn the projector back on. All right. Number 3 on page 346. Let's just look at it real quick. Once the projector comes back on. Garcia Manufacturing Company made purchases of a material as shown in the following listing. The inventory at the end of the year, listen, end of year inventory, 3,500 units. Compute the value of the inventory by each of the 3 methods, average cost and first in, first out, and LIFO. Remember, end of year was 3,500 units. That's important to know. So, if we're going to do average, what 2 numbers do we need? If we're going to do average inventory, you need to add up all your units. Your beginning inventory was right there, right? All your purchases that came in. Remember, I can have outstanding purchase orders, but until it hits my door, I don't count them for my average inventory. So you'll see we got some stuff in March 11th, May 14th, and throughout the year for a total of 20,000 units, including my beginning inventory. Add my unit price, multiply units by unit cost, gives me extended cost. Add my extended cost together, I get $122,400. I do not need to do anything with this column other than use it to calculate my extended cost. Once I have these two numbers, I just divide units into cost, and I'll get $6.12. 122,400 divided by the number of units gives me a unit cost, an average unit cost of $6.12. Now remember, my ending inventory right here, inventory at end of year was 3,500 units. So I take my average unit price, which was $6.12, and multiply it by 3,500 units. And that will give me $21,420. And that's my average inventory. That's how I find my average inventory. Total units, total cost. Take that into that, and you'll get your average unit price. But unit price is not what we were asking for. We were asking for average inventory cost. So you've got to take your average unit cost, multiply it by your end of year on hand, and you'll get your average inventory right there. $21,420. So, how about if we do first in, first out, FIFO? Now remember, FIFO is my most recent receipts. My most recent receipt was what? My most recent was November 10th. I got 2,500 in at $6.40 a piece. So for FIFO, remember, I'm using my most recent receipt. Now, keep in mind, my ending inventory was 3,500. That receipt was only for 2,500. So I still got to go get 1,000 more somewhere. So for FIFO, I go to my second most recent, which was September 7th. I got 4,000 in, but I don't need 4,000. I only need 1,000 more to make my ending inventory number of 3,500. I can take that number with me. So remember, I'm taking the 2,500 from November 10th, along with the 640, getting to get an extended cost. And then I've got to come up here and grab 1,000 from these to make sure I account for all 3,500 ending inventory units. So I bring that over, 1,000 at 620, get my extended cost, and again, I just add that up, and I get 2,220, or 2,200, or 22,200. Now, if we do LIFO, remember, if FIFO is my most recent inventory, or my most recent receipts, LIFO is my oldest inventory, right? In this case, my oldest inventory is my beginning inventory. So, for LIFO, I go back, my opening inventory was 3,600. I only need 3,500, which was my ending inventory. So, I just take 3,500 of these, multiply it by 620, that's all we did. 3,500 times 620 gives me 21,700. Here's how you do your three inventories. Just remember, FIFO is your most recent receipts. LIFO is your oldest inventory. It can be your beginning inventory. An average, you just get your two numbers, right? That's all there is to that. All right, let's do one more. Let's go over to page 350. Look at number 9. Now we're not going to do all this. Oh, I forgot the slide number. Hold on. Yes, I'm just walking through the screen. Slide number 31. All right. Some things to remember here, right? I wonder if this will show up on the board. Hold on. Let's see how this looks. Can you see that all right? So I'm looking at number 9 on page 350. All we're trying to do is calculate cost of goods sold and ending inventory. What you're going to do, now remember our little tips from the previous video. Markup based on cost. As soon as I see markup based on cost, I know I'm going to divide. Markup based on sales, as soon as I see sales, I know I'm going to multiply. Pretty quick, yes? When I see markup based on cost, I'm going to divide and add to 100%. When I see markup based on sales, I'm going to multiply and subtract the markup from 100%. That's all I'm going to do. So I'm going to do markup based on cost, this column. Let's go to 9A. We see goods available for sale is 204,000, net sales are 260,000. So all I have to do is take 260,000, and I'll put it up here if you'll let me. 260,000, because it's based on cost, I know I'm going to divide. Because it's based on cost, I'm going to add 30% to 100%. Then I get what? 200,000. Estimated ending inventory. How do I find estimated ending? How do I find estimated ending inventory? I have estimated cost of goods, right? I also have cost available for sale, or available for sale. So to find this number, my estimated ending inventory, I just take cost of goods available for sale minus my cost of goods, and I get $4,000 estimated ending inventory. Hope that's showing up for you guys. All right? Let's do another one. Let's do letter B. Cost of goods available for sale is 268,000. Net sales were 260. It's based on sales, right? So sales, I know I'm going to multiply and subtract from 100%. Right? So my cost of goods sold was 268. Right? Or no, 260, I'm sorry. Net sales was 260. Because it's based on sales, I'm going to multiply. And because it's based on sales, the percentage is subtracted from 100%. So 100% minus 30% is 70%. And I come up with 182,000. Oh, it says right here 182,000. To find my estimated ending inventory, my cost of goods is 268, I'm sorry, 268 minus 182. And it leaves me $86,000. The bottom line here, my friends, read. If it's based on cost, it's going to be division, and you're going to add 100%. If it's based on sales, you're going to multiply, and you're going to subtract from 100%. Just read. You've got to read the question. You've got to read the question. All right. Now, let's take a look at, if you'll just go with me to page 347, some of this is on your homework. You have question 1 and you have question 2. My friends, you cannot answer question 2 without doing question 1. So, even though the homework is for question 2, make sure you do question 1. You can't do question 2 without question 1 because there's numbers that you have to bring with you from question 1 to answer question 2. That's all I'm saying. Unless you call me on the phone or send me an email, then I'll answer it. But you've got to do question 1 to answer question 2 on page 347. All right, that's inventory turnover. That is chapter 17. That's a mess up there, but I hope it makes sense to you. Have fun.